What happened to those who refused to leave? Has the truth about this place become lost in the infamy of the disaster? Standing a kilometre from where the nuclear accident happened, we're getting less of an external dose of radiation than on the flight over.
3 times less than what we got on the aeroplane coming over.
What does the future hold for those who still live in the shadow of Chernobyl?
Їхати ми нікуди не збираємось. Тут живуть наші діти.
...130 kilometers north of the capital, Kiev, part of Ukraine has been cut off for more than 30 years. Heading for the exclusion zone, which is quite exciting, sort of a forbidden place and shrouded in mystery. This is a controlled zone, a contaminated area almost twice the size of London that we have special permission to visit. We're going to the epicenter of an explosion. It happened on the 26th of April, 1986, a day the world would never forget.
The Soviet Union admitted this evening that there's been an accident at one of its nuclear power stations.
Авария произошла в одном из помещений 4-го энергоблока.
Perhaps the worst accident in the short history of the world's nuclear power industry.
We're taking a tour of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant with our guide, Stanislav.
Left side is for the control rooms. Here across the wall, control room of you.
Safety regulations mean we have to protect our clothes from radioactive dust.
I know one rule. If you follow all rules, you don't break rules, everything will be okay. And 28 years, a little bit more passed after my first coming to Chernobyl NPT. Everything is okay. God bless us.
With us is a scientist whose life's work has hinged on that one terrifying night in Soviet history.
How long have you been studying the aftermath of what happened here?
Since 1990.
Have you ever been into the reactor building?
I've never been before.
Reactor number 4 still leaks radiation, so it's entombed by a steel confinement structure containing remains that were blasted apart. This is footage captured beneath that dome. A now solidified mass of concrete and nuclear fuel is still so radioactive that people can't be under here for more than a few minutes. But the plant continued to produce power until the year 2000, and the neighbouring reactor is still being decommissioned. Few visitors are allowed in here, but we've been given permission to look inside.
Your alarm going off?
That's my alarm going off, yeah.
What have we done?
So we've gone up to 14, and I set the amber warning to be at 10. So we've just gone over that.
Throughout our trip, Jim is carrying a dosimeter, measuring the radiation dose we're getting every hour.
We're still well below the level where I considered we didn't want to get to. But I'm just going to switch it off because we don't want it going all the time.
There's a strange atmosphere to this place, and you're so trussed up that there's a nervousness, there's a fear to that, I think. My heart's beating quite fast, actually.
It was 1:23 a.m. when engineers cut power to part of the Chernobyl plant's number 4 reactor. They were testing what would happen in the event of a blackout. What they didn't know was that the reactor was already unstable.
It wasn't just one person, it was a whole chain of people, from the reactor design people to the people operating it to the whole kind of safety culture.
The shutdown slowed turbines that drove a flow of cooling water to the reactor.
Reactor collapsed. Reactor collapsed, everything collapsed, and when this engineer pushed the button to stop chain reaction, big pressure of water, steam was coming from the bottom.
The steam explosion blew the lid off the reactor, exposing the core to the atmosphere. Air fueled a fire that burned for 10 days. That initial explosion killed 2 people. In the days that followed, emergency workers rushed in. People known as liquidators were sent to remove highly radioactive material that had been blasted onto the roofs of nearby buildings so it could be swept up and contained. 134 emergency workers suffered acute radiation sickness. 28 died within months. Another 19 have died since. Some surviving workers today live with skin and eye injuries from working in that highly radioactive environment. And the impact wasn't confined to this site or even to this country. A cloud of radioactive smoke and dust was carried on the wind around Europe. Information emerged only gradually from behind the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union. That cloud, though, carried the truth of the disaster. The world held its breath. This was the largest accidental release of radioactivity into the environment in the history of nuclear power production. The cause, who was to blame, are issues still being debated to this day.
Every so-called accident, incident concerned with the human factor. If there were some defects here in this type of thing, who was the designer? A robot? No, a man. And if the personnel made some mistakes during that test, who were the robots? No, the personnel. Everywhere we come to one conclusion, and that is the human factor everywhere practically.
Today, the consequences of that terrible accident are etched onto this region. Within a boundary drawn at a 30-kilometre radius of the plant is the primary exclusion zone. No one was allowed to return here to live. But just beyond that, captured by an outer boundary, is a secondary zone where people have been left in limbo.
Раз, два, три, чотири.
The town of Narodici has a population of 2,500. Tatiana runs the kindergarten. She remembers the evacuation.
Коли сталася аварія, зразу із садочка забрали разом з вихователями всіх дітей, вивезли без батьків. Діти з вихователем, всіх персоналом вивезли в чисті зони. І коли через 3 місяці привезли назад, життя продовжувалось, багато повертались назад, діти народжувались. І тому поступово дитячий садок почав наповнюватися дітьми.
But the future for these children and their families is uncertain. Narodici has some of the lowest radiation levels in the exclusion zone, but it's still officially designated contaminated. That means no agriculture is permitted and nothing new can be built here.
Це ж не секрет, що у нас половина батьків ніде не працює за того, що нема де працювати. Так хочеться, щоб ми так розквітли.
So could the secret to a new start for Narodici be hidden in the permanently abandoned primary zone? For many, it's a frightening place, but in the decades since the accident, hundreds of scientists have worked here, forensically examining Chernobyl's aftermath. We're going to meet a true exclusion zone expert.
Amazing. Awesome. It's amazing.
Dr. Sergei Gashak came here in the immediate aftermath as one of the thousands of liquidators. He's now a scientist. Although it's not legal to live here permanently, he still works here from this previously abandoned house.
Oh, this is a proper field station then. You have lockers for everybody's kit, somewhere to leave the boots.
Yeah.
This is very organised. Is this a map of the exclusion zone?
Yeah.
The red are the hotspots?
Yeah.
Where is the nuclear power plant?
Be soon above Valfly. Yeah.
For this international community of scientists, the zone is a vast laboratory, allowing them to measure how a landscape recovers from nuclear catastrophe.
Altogether, this is the largest protected area in Europe, by a long way.
They eat, sleep and discuss their work here, but their days are spent out in the field. Today, with the research team, we're looking for wildlife. And following Sergei, we eventually come across one of many now desolate villages. It's become a strangely rich habitat, and the place Sergei seems totally at home.
I'm a feral man.
You're a feral man.
Sometimes I see my family not so often like wilds.
This is Bukovka, which I'm probably pronouncing really badly. It's just completely taken over, which is why these villages have sort of become hubs for where some of these ecological studies can be done, because this is just a totally different place. It's not a village anymore, it's sort of a rewilded landscape. Inside some of these houses, it's still apparent just how quickly people had to leave. You know, you can see someone's coat.
Yeah, this absolutely.
But some of what people left behind through farming and gardening has turned into provisions for wild animals.
People, before the accident, introduced here a lot of plants. Also, they fertilized soil. So soil in villages a little bit richer than surrounding areas. That is why, according to already long-term study, we observe higher level of diversity of animals.
We have wolf.
Just outside the village, there are some obvious signs of animal life that moved in when people moved out.
You wanted to see wolf feces. We have fresh wolf feces.
But Jim Smith's here with Sergei to check cameras and audio recorders that have been silently monitoring the wildlife. All these years, combining the tracking of animal populations and measuring the contamination, suggests wildlife is now thriving in a place that many had assumed to be toxic.
Yes, the exclusion zone is contaminated, but if we would put it on a map of radiation dose worldwide, only the small hotspots would stand out. Natural radioactivity is all around us, and it varies from country to country, from place to place. And most of the area of the exclusion zone gives rise to lower radiation dose rates than many areas of natural radioactivity worldwide.